It was embarrassing. It really was. Non-Americans that watched it had to shake their heads and feel bad for these poor fools here in the U.S. that it's come to this. You can see the U.S. falling apart at the seams in many ways, and of course, uh, that was a sub-theme of the debate where Trump was saying he built the greatest economy or the greatest, everything's the greatest, the best in history, the most beautiful. But now Biden blew it all up, and Biden's saying that he's saying both of them were saying that we're the greatest, except Trump was saying we were the greatest when I was in office. And yeah, I watched it. It was laughable. It was pathetic. It was awful. It was such a far cry from the Nixon-Kennedy debates where they actually talked intelligently and coherently about issues.
All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back with some questions from members of the file. If you'd like to ask Doug questions, join crisisinvesting.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and get added to file, and you can ask questions. I decided to check this morning instead of relying on the woke Encyclopedia Britannica only for what happened this day in history. And I came up with some interesting things it's worth sharing. I think today in 1914 was the event that triggered World War I with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Any thoughts on that?
That? And that led to the Guns of August, as Barbara Tuchman said. So it's a pity. And I know that Archduke Franz and his wife, whose name was Sophie, they were both decent human beings, certainly for European royalty, and wanted to solve this problem with the Serbs being part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is really what that dust-up was all about. So that's a pity.
Well, it's kind of weird that the Treaty of Versailles was signed on the anniversary of that in 1919. So the beginning and the end of World War I all encapsulated nicely on this date.
Yeah, certain symmetry of history, I suppose. If I was making history up from whole cloth, I might have written it that way just because it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of gives some credence to the simulation theory, at least to me. I don't know, this weird symmetry of events that seems to occur over and over.
Yes, well, some would say God has a sense of humor, but I've never met the man, so I can't testify one way or the other.
Just a couple of other interesting births today. You often quote Gilda Radner. She was born this day in 1946, so I feel like that's worth mentioning. And
yes, Gilda, her classic character, Rosanna Dana. If it's not one thing, it's something else. It's always something. And that's so true. It's an astute observation on Gilda's part.
it is. She was great. And Elon Musk was born today in 1971.
And Elon is a heroic billionaire, and he's the only libertarian-oriented billionaire of the really heavyweight, famous ones like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos. And I don't know, is there anybody else that's really in their class? Well, Warren Buffett, I guess.
Yeah, I guess maybe this NVIDIA CEO and founder must be now in that class.
Yeah, he's a new arrival on the scene. But speaking, what I really like about Musk is that, and there are other things to like about him. It's that he really does appear to have some kind of libertarian values, and it's funny in the so-called debate between Trump and Biden last night. Biden said, he said there were 1,000 trillionaires. Well, he meant billionaires, and he corrected himself. But 1,000 in the U.S. That's a lot. I remember, as does anybody of a certain age, when there was only 1 or 2 billionaires in the world, and they were famously Howard Hughes, who was reputed to be a billionaire way back when, and John Beresford Tipton, who was a mythical billionaire. There was this TV show called The Millionaire back in the 1950s, where this billionaire would give away $1 million tax-free to somebody every week on the TV show just to see what they do with it, whether they destroy themselves or do something productive or something interesting anyway. So John Beresford Tipton, a mythical but interesting billionaire, and J. Paul Getty was reputed to be a billionaire in the same back in the Howard Hughes days. But now there's so many of them; they're thick underfoot.
They are, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I think primarily having to do with our fiat money system, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, we'll have many more of them. Everybody will be a billionaire in the future. Well, in Zimbabwe, everybody was a multi-trillionaire by the end of the last experiment they had.
I think one of the cool things about Elon, by comparison to especially these hedge fund guys, that a lot of them, a lot of the billionaires in this hedge fund class, is that he actually makes real things. It's kind of like the Howard Hughes example, where he really is making things that you can see and experience in the world. And that's so rare these days. It's just.
Yeah, he's really improved the nature of the world. Now, people say, well, he got a lot of his funding initially from the deep state, from the CIA. They gave him money under the table and so forth. Well, I don't know whether that's the case, but whatever happened, wherever he got some of that starter cash, he did marvelous things. He started Tesla. He's building the Boring Company. He's built SpaceX. He's building Neuralink. And who knows what else he's got. I'm sure he's got a couple other things.
The robots portion, which I guess he's going to keep in Tesla, but he thought about spinning that out separately. But apparently that offers a lot of promise. I mean, it could be much larger than Tesla is.
Yeah, he's a world-class genius with good instincts, which I define as having basically libertarian style instincts. And it's not like he's trying to live high off the hog. He sleeps in his factories. He sleeps in cots. He sold his houses. He's a free spirit that just likes to create things, it seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, like I'm a little suspect of him in some areas, but you can't deny that it's the impressive things he's been able to accomplish. I mean, it really is amazing.
Yep. So I put down Elon as one of the good guys. I was on somebody's podcast several years ago where we were talking about billionaires, and I mentioned that I thought back then that Elon was a good guy. And I got hundreds of responses from people that said that I'm a tool of the state, I've been paid off, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, because I said something good about Elon. So
yeah, it's like saying something about Putin. You're a Putin shill or
exactly.
I mean, the thing is, the problem is that you can't actually, we've created a culture where you cannot hold anyone up as a figure at all to be modeled in any way. Like everything great must be destroyed and reduced to, some fraud of some kind. So you can't, so if you say anything positive about Putin, you must be a shill. You couldn't possibly be just saying that he's vastly more reasonable and measured and more intelligent than the Western leaders. You have to be a shill of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the fact that things are like that is one coincidental indicator of the fact that we're heading towards something like a civil war, where even in this so-called debate that the two candidates had last night, a reference was made by one of them, I don't remember which one, about being a uniter of the country. I don't think you could have a uniter of the country at this point because the battle lines have been drawn.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a profound, several, but one big one really, philosophical difference between the red and the blue sides, the wokesters and the non-wokesters, if you would. And you can't unite these people. It's like trying to unite free market capitalists and communists. How do you do that? Well, you can't.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this all started really with George Bush and his whole "you're with us or against us," and everything is defined in that context. You're on one side or the other. Just that's all you got, all you can do.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So let's talk.
And we'll find out. I think we can find out how this all comes down. Well, to some degree this year, and to a much larger degree by the time the next elections occur, assuming they occur.
So let's talk about the debate from last night. You watched it. You stood up to watch it. I waited. I got up early this morning and watched it. I couldn't stay up this way past my bedtime. But what did you? What was your take on it?
It was embarrassing. It really was. Uh, non-Americans that watched it had to shake their heads and feel bad for these poor fools here in the US that it's come to this. You can see the US falling apart at the seams in many ways. And of course, uh, that was a sub-theme of the debate where Trump was saying he built the greatest economy or the greatest, everything's the greatest, the best in history, the most beautiful. And but now Biden blew it all up, and Biden's saying that he's saying both of them were saying that we're the greatest, except Trump was saying we were the greatest when I was in office. And yeah, I watched it. It was laughable. It was pathetic. It was awful. It was such a far cry from the Nixon-Kennedy debates where they actually talked intelligently and coherently about issues.
Right. Yeah, neither one of them could do that. And I really think you see, even with Trump, how far he's declined since 2016 in the debates, where he had lots of facts and details and was able to crush his opponents. So you remember the Republican primary, and even when his prior debates with Biden last time, I mean, he was much more on it himself with details. And this time he just defaulted to, he couldn't, it's like he talked about, they're talking about the migrant problems. And he was brought up this recent case where this 12-year-old girl was raped and killed by these migrants, but he couldn't recall the facts around that. If he could recall that story that just happened like 2 weeks ago, then that's such a powerful example. But he couldn't quite, you could see him trying to grasp it and say he couldn't quite do it, and then just said, well, it's just a mess.
That's right. If you told the story quietly and coherently, it would have been effective. But this so-called debate was actually nothing but a name-calling contest. I subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, and I often read their comments to the editor because the readers of the journal are much more well-read and richer, and it's a very good demographic for a national newspaper, let's put it that way, with a lot of intelligent comments. And I was shocked. Obviously, there were thousands of responses from the readers in the Wall Street Journal. I couldn't read them all, but I read the top or the first 100 or so that this morning, and not once did anybody mention that there was no substance talked about in this so-called debate. Not once did anybody mention what stood out to me anyway is the biggest thing, which was it was just an insult contest between the two of them. I'm guessing, I haven't counted, but I am sure that Biden used the word liar 30, 40 times in reference to Trump. And it occurred to me, this is like a couple of pre-teenage kids trashing each other. Hey, so's your old man. Hey,
Yeah.
your ma's so ugly that. And then finally, I was expecting one of them to come back with the knockout punch. Hey, up your nose with the rubber hose. That was the level of that was the level of the debate between these two. It was nothing but an insult contest between the two of them.
Yeah, I think that was just overshadowed by Biden's obvious degradation. And so that's what all the comments I saw were all talking about that.
Yeah. Yeah, he was trying to concentrate, but he lost his train of thought at least a couple of times in the process. And actually, in his own way, Trump was no better because when he was actually asked questions by the two hosts, who I think did a fairly fair and balanced, as they say, job of moderating. It wasn't objectionable, even though they're both lefties. It wasn't objectionable in any way. And Trump never answered the questions. He would first divert to saying something about what Biden said the last time, taking most of the time, and then some broad generality, and then saying, if he had, insofar as he wanted to answer any question, it was that this wouldn't have happened if I'd been in office for the last 4 years, or however. And of course, many, many times, Trump said, using his standard phrases, which I find very amusing when he's giving a speech to his supporters, where so we're going to make it the biggest, we're going to make it the best, we are the best, we're the most beautiful. He's got about, I guess he's got about 20 stock phrases that he always throws out there. Beautiful, best, biggest, greatest, and words to that effect. So he did it, and I find it quite amusing when he does that, when he's talking to his supporters. But last night, it was really just kind of pathetic. He was throwing these things out instead of saying anything that was interesting and of substance. So it wasn't even good comedy.
Yeah. Now, because you've said so many negative things about Trump, they're going to accuse you of being a Biden shill, I suppose, when people see this.
I suppose they will. And what I got to say now is that it would have greatly elevated the tone of the so-called debate if Bobby Kennedy had been there, because at least Bobby Kennedy, I suspect, would have tried to answer questions put to him and tried to give coherent answers, whether they would be answers that you or I would like. They might have been half the time anyway. But it's too bad that Bobby wasn't on the stage. It would have exposed these two guys for being as pathetic as they both are. They both are. Although, let me mention, I do support Trump, given a choice between him and Biden. There's no choice.
Yeah.
But only
Yeah.
because Trump is a cultural conservative. That's the reason why. He doesn't want to overthrow what remains of the U.S.
Well, and
America.
it seems like Trump doesn't hate the typical American, where you really feel like Biden and the current regime really has a deep loathing, not just for Trump, but for anybody who would vote for Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, this thing with the deplorables that
Hillary.
where that Hillary, and I guess Hillary still really is kind of hoping that the Democrats will plug her in. And but I've said before, I think since the Democrats want to maintain control of the reins of power, they can't run Biden. I mean, even all the Democrats that were talking after the debate, and Democrats that you read in the paper, I read a few of these things, everybody recognizes that Biden is just I don't think he ever had his prime. He was always a nothing nobody, frankly, but
Yeah.
he's way over the hill now. So they don't want to lose control of the apparatus of the state. So they must put somebody else in there, whether it's before the convention because Biden drops out, or after the convention. For I don't know how the machinations work within the party in that, but he's not going to run. That's doesn't make sense because if he runs, you have to assume that they're going to run Kamala too. Yeah, which means that when Biden uh, kicks the bucket or is taken out by, is it the 25th Amendment, whichever one that says,
Yeah, 25th.
yeah, that says when you're just incapable of performing, the VP comes up. Well, you can't have that. So no, he's not going to run. Uh,
Yeah, and I think we discussed a couple weeks ago that the theory that the only reason they were putting him out on the debate stage was to make it obvious to everybody that it was time for him to go, because I mean, because most people just don't pay attention to politics, but in these kind of, for some reason, people do pay attention to the debates more. And so it's like, if they wanted to protect Biden from it, like they did during the last election, where they didn't let him leave his basement and only did, very controlled interviews with people who liked him already, with his supporters. If they wanted to run him, they wouldn't have put him up for this debate. He didn't have to do it.
yeah, yeah. So he's not going to run. I don't know who is going to run. They can't run that cackling hyena, Kamala. Uh, I don't think they can run, uh, that harpy, uh, Bill Clinton's wife. That's not going to work either. I don't know who the Democrats have. I, Everybody says, well, could it be Michelle? Uh, could it be Gavin Newsom? I guess he's the one that the name usually comes up. He's got some name recognition.
He does. Yeah, it is interesting. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's difficult to say what they'll do, but I think that what I was reading in the Wall Street Journal today is they said that the way that they could do it is replace him is with a open convention where he steps out and then the convention becomes an open convention, and someone could come out of nowhere, somebody we don't know of who could end up being selected, or they could wait until after the convention. And then there's this like special committee that the DNC has, that so after he's appointed, if he then steps down from it, then the choice is limited to this committee. So it's totally controlled by some insiders within the DNC.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it even has to be somebody who's well known at this point, because the media and the means of diffusing information now is so powerful. I mean, a number of times in the past, Americans, especially in the last century, most people couldn't know what was going on outside of their local area because they just read their local paper. So most people didn't know. So this time you could make somebody an instant overnight success, and they could pick almost anybody as long as it suits the powers that be. And they're kind of presentable looking and whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, any other thoughts on the debate that you wanted to share before we moved on?
No, other than that, it was a complete fiasco, and there was absolutely no issue that these two discussed where they actually discussed it. Not at all. It was just, you're a liar, I'm the greatest, blah, 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 back and forth. No.
Yeah, I loved it when Biden even called Trump fat.
Oh, oh, did he? I missed that.
Yeah, he talked about him and says, you say you're 225 pounds. And he's like, looking at him,
Oh, well, if that was the case, then Trump did miss the opportunity to come back with, yeah, and so's your old man.
Exactly. Yeah, the two other things, I guess, is that one, apparently, I haven't seen it yet, but Bobby Kennedy ran a like parallel debate where he was asked the same questions by I think it was John Stossel actually. And that,
Uh-huh.
so he was like trying to create his own thing. I was excluded, but I'm still going to do it. So I haven't gone through and watched that yet, but I am going to go through and just see how his answers
Oh,
compare to these guys.
oh, that is interesting. Do send me the link. I'd like to see that. That would be good to analyze what Bobby says. But I'm afraid he may have Bobby has got all kinds of philosophical faults that I can see so far anyway. But I'm afraid he might have shot himself in the foot by choosing this woman billionaire who, as his VP just because she's got money and that's the only reason to choose her. And she's a hardcore lefty from before that got lucky in a marriage. So he could have chose more wisely.
Yeah, he definitely could have. Definitely could have. So there's that. And then the other thing that I just think is interesting to point out is the logistics of the debate. And I thought it all actually worked out fine. There was a lot of talk in advance, the way they were doing it by cutting the mics off so they couldn't talk over each other. And then last minute they said they're putting on a 2-minute delay and there's no one, we knew there was going to be no crowd. That I thought that all worked out fine, actually. It was managed pretty well. But
Yeah.
I could see that laying the groundwork. I mean, where what we're seeing debate might not even be the people that are debating, because you could see like deep fakes replacing that, because the elements that would be hard for AI to reproduce, because I've done videos where we take you and we make you speak Spanish and I could put any words in your mouth really with that. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So we know this can be done, but imagine if there's no audience there to witness it, there's no talking over each other, or this dynamic debate would actually occur. It just you're mediating these people further from the public. So you won't even know what's real soon. If this is the standard they use going forward, it's interesting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's no longer a question of believing your own eyes because your eyes are lying to you with the deep fake that can be put up there. So it's all, you can't believe anything anymore. All the more reason why the US government should be abolished. It not only serves no useful purpose, but is an active and clear and present danger to every American and frankly, everybody in the world at this point.
No
This
doubt
is the
about that.
best argument that I know for anarcho-capitalism. But it's too early to elect a Javier Milei lookalike in the US because things have not totally collapsed yet, as they did in Argentina, which is why Javier Milei won.
Yeah, exactly. One other article before we get into some questions is that you shared with me a couple of days ago. It's about Kenyan protesters who stormed Parliament. What was it about that drew your interest?
Well, who would care if in Africa, 54 countries, and there was always a coup or a storming of the parliament or something going on in those countries. But this is unusual in Kenya in that apparently the reason for it was it was a widespread nationwide tax revolt on the part of the Kenyans because I saw the numbers the other day, and in the last 20 years, the Kenyan government has gone from appropriating something on the order of 10% of the GNP, as best as you can figure in a rather backward country, to something like 25% now. It's a huge growth. And they raised taxes again in Kenya to pay for the government. So the average Kenyan doesn't like it because he doesn't have any money. I mean, you take a little bit more from him and it's actually taking the bread off his family's table. So it was a tax revolt that did this. Will it change anything? Probably not, because all over the world, people really think that government should provide health care for everybody and schooling and all the rest of this type of thing. So nothing will change. They just don't like their family standard of living to go down to pay for these other freebies it's pretty hopeless. Anyway, I thought it was interesting because it was a tax revolt storming of their capital.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's like they had their own little tea party happening.
Yeah. Yeah, nothing will change, but it was nice to see.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into some of these questions.
And the other thing is, of course, it's mainly Kenyans, the Kenyan army, that's being shipped into Haiti at U.S. taxpayer expense to sort out the problems in Haiti. And I can't wait to see what happens. It'll be a battle between an African army and scores of black criminal gangs that are heavily armed and pretty well organized now in Haiti. So can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah,
Paid,
it's also
all
funny that
paid for by the U.S. taxpayer, or I should not even by the U.S. taxpayer so much, by American citizens, because it's all being paid for with money created out of thin air under MMT, modern monetary theory. So it's the economy in general that will pay for it, not even just taxpayers anymore.
Right. And it's funny that it's just like an effort for the US government to put a blackface on our efforts in Haiti. We don't, because we don't want to send white people there anymore.
Oh, God forbid. No, Haiti is no longer a place where a white man can go. It's very, very dangerous. And I speak as somebody who's been to Haiti any number of times over the last 50 years. And I've kind of watched how the place has changed and gone downhill. It is absolutely astounding, shocking.
Okay. Let's get into some of these questions. So first question is, he says, it seems from research that migratory animals like salmon, after wandering huge distances in the open ocean for years, will return to the exact river where they were born to breed and then die, as if they have a homing instinct or a sense of home. Similar with birds. And he said, I wonder if the Europeans who left their ancestral homelands for the New World, Australia, New Zealand, and America, carry some memory or longing or grief for a place of belonging that perhaps unconsciously and unacknowledged remains alive somewhere deep inside as a pang of the heart that no food or drink can assuage. I've spoken with people who call themselves shamans, he says, who found it amusing that such a question would even be asked, as such was their certainty that this was in fact the case. He said, I myself feel a great connection to a land that I fear I can no longer live in. Doug, do you feel like you found a place of belonging in your new country so as not to feel like a stranger in a strange land?
That's actually a good question. I look out the window here. Guess, I don't know, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, that's my backyard. It's a big pasture. And it looks like it would in Virginia or in the Midwest or California. It's just a big farm field. So does it really make much difference whether it's here or there or anywhere? I guess it's just the people around. The nice thing about Europe, which is where Caucasians, well, I guess we come from the Caucasus, they say, where white people basically come from is the culture and the buildings and things of that nature. And the fact that that your great-great-grandfather, whoever it was born there, like the birds or the salmon, this person pointed out. I don't know. But look, 50 years from now, Europe is going to be a totally different place, totally different than it is now, even if we don't have World War III, with nuclear weapons destroying everything, or it'll be populated by people from the Middle East and from Africa. So look, it won't belong to your ancestors anymore. I don't know. Look, let me go further. It's that the Earth is a really nice place, but it's part of the Milky Way galaxy, and we've got about 400 million suns. It's funny. When you think of these astronomical numbers, it's easy to get millions confused with billions. Now, how many suns do we have and they don't know the exact number, do we have circulating in the Milky Way galaxy? I think it's 400 million. It's not 400 billion. But the Milky Way is just one of, and they're guessing because nobody knows, 2 trillion galaxies of at least the size of the Milky Way. So, and it's been determined now that most of these suns have planets. So you've got trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of planets out there, many or most of which are inhabitable, maybe not by life forms like ourselves. So I try not to get too attached to being here on the Earth. I'm trying to look at the big picture. And I don't know what I did in a past lifetime, assuming I lived a past lifetime, I can't prove that, to put me here on this prison planet with all these crazy chimpanzees. So I don't know if that's a good answer to that question or not, but I don't worry about it too much.
Have you ever, was there a point where you felt like a place was home? Like, you know, I could say for me where I grew up in the Midwest, if I still think about the word home, I probably still think about that place. But it was really important to me for my kids that they didn't have that association. So when I wanted them to grow up somewhere else, and they now associate that other place with home. They have that same nostalgia to that place. And I wonder if it's natural that you have the place where you grow up and you create these memories as a kid, that it feels like it has some meaning to you, but that is just a generational thing and not like a hereditary thing, you know?
Yeah, good question. I think it's probably a generational thing, not a long-term hereditary thing. I was born in Chicago, grew up there in northern Indiana, and I have warm feelings about the place, kind of, but
Like me in the Midwest, you had to leave. Anybody who could got out.
yeah, and I'm very glad I left.
Yeah, me too. 100%. I'm really glad that I severed that bond with my kids, so they didn't have that sense that place that's dying every day is there where they're supposed to be, you know, because I didn't want them to be burdened with that same thing I felt. But then every time I go back there, I'd feel like I was dying a little bit every day along with it. So I knew you need to get out.
Yeah, I like to avoid atavism. In fact, when I talk about having been born in Chicago, the fact of the matter is, I was born in Cicero, Illinois, which is where Al Capone made his mark. So is that anything to be proud of? Not particularly. And grew up in the suburbs, partially in Aurora, Illinois, which is only famous for being where Wayne's World is from. So is that anything to be proud of? Not particularly. And northern Indiana, that's where the Blues Brothers were from. That's basically. So it's not like I have anything drawing me back with those past associations.
No, I understand. All right, next question. First one relates to gold coins. It says, I've heard Doug speak of his like and interest in 19th century European gold coins. It says he has a shared same interest in these, and he likes the historical aspect as well as the low premiums. Recently, he purchased a couple of Napoleon the First 20 francs, he says. He said there's a high premium, but I'm thinking a higher collectible interest in the long term. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Not a bad thing to do, buy 19th century gold, early 20th century gold, simply because since they're of historical value, the chances are much lower that if the worst comes to worst, the government will confiscate them again. So wise choice, number one. Number two, the premiums are quite low, another good reason. Third good reason is that they're small. Those coins you're referring, the French Louis d'Or and the Swiss Vernelli and the German, all of them are, those things are generally about 0.18 ounces of gold apiece. The British sovereign is about 0.23 ounces of gold apiece. And so that's, they're more bite size. They're much, much less likely to be picked up by government officials that see them in your luggage if you're transporting a few. But they will pick up, I promise you, the 1 ounce coins. They're on the lookout for those. So yeah, good choices. Absolutely.
Okay. His second question, he says, involves a strategy change. He said, I have a small business with some retained earnings sitting in in a nothing interest account. It's only, he says, under 100,000 euros, but he's considering two options for this. One, trading it on some riskier mining stocks with a tax advantage for companies doing this in Germany, or converting it to Bitcoin as a Bitcoin treasury. It just one, as a minnow version of MicroStrategy's approach. So his question is on the latter part. I have a sense that increasingly more companies will start adding Bitcoin to their treasuries. Do you have any thoughts on either strategy?
I'm a bull on Bitcoin for reasons that we've discussed in the past. So nothing wrong with doing that. And I think that now, unless this time is different, and things are rarely very different, this is one of the best times ever to buy these junior mining stocks, which have been flat on their backs now for years. It'll change at some point. So yeah, I think you're right. And you can't leave your money in euros or dollars because it's being inflated out of existence by keeping it there. So you're almost forced to do something else. You're forced to, or you'll suffer death by 1,000 cuts. So it's just a question of what you want to speculate on.
Yeah, in one company I have, we took a portion of the cash that we had sitting, in a nothing bearing interest account also, and we bought some Bitcoin with it. So I mean, it's not a bad idea, at least as a hedge. The stuff better than cash.
Yeah.
The next question is, he said, I just want you to comment on something really. He said he got in an argument with one of those, quote, hooting chimps, as Doug often calls them, about the American Civil War. And he asserted that Lincoln was actually not a hero and really more of a villain, that he trampled on the Constitution, that he sent countless soldiers and civilians to a massive slaughter and put the South and its civilians back in the Stone Age, et cetera, basically talking about this view of the Civil War. And he just wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
I absolutely agree. Lincoln is just about universally picked as being the best U.S. president by historians. Would I pick him as being the worst? Well, he's in competition for being the worst. Who else? Woodrow Wilson, absolutely criminal personality, horrible person. For World War I, which was financed by the Federal Reserve and by the income tax, which Wilson also presided over, destroying civil rights, horrible person. Is he worse than Lincoln? Or Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who totally, and he's generally looked upon as being one of the 2 or 3 best also. He's actually one of the 2 or 3 worst. He totally transformed the U.S. economy, turned it into the emphasis on the state, the fascist economy it is today. So, yeah, and you can't say enough bad things about Lincoln, although it must be said he was an excellent rhetorician, and should the U.S. have been kept together? I'd say the answer is definitely no. And we've had discussions in the past about what the Civil War was really about, and it wasn't about freeing the slaves. That was something everybody was talking about. It was an issue at the time, but slavery would have ended anyway. The last country in the world, major country in the world to end slavery was, well, the serfs were freed during the 1860s, and they weren't slaves, but the next step from it. But the last country to actually have slaves and free them was Brazil, and that was 1888. And Brazil was a much more backward economy than the US. So it was inevitable that slavery was going to collapse just because it was uneconomic. And here I will mention that the last country in the world to free slavery was only in 1985, and it was Mauritania. And having spent a week in Mauritania, I can tell you that, yeah, they did free the slaves in 1985, but as a practical matter, there's not much difference. So anyway, this thing about the cult of Lincoln and turning him into a demigod, it's shameful.
Isn't it weird that the three presidents you mentioned were all responsible for massive wars? Wilson, FDR, and Lincoln. Isn't it
Yeah,
weird that
good
those
point.
people are?
Yeah, war is the health of the state. And that brings me to the fourth candidate, remind me, for worst president, and that is Lyndon Baines Johnson. The Vietnam War was all about Johnson. And the Great Society and welfare programs, that was all Johnson too. Yeah.
So maybe that's what why he's pushing for war on all fronts, because he wants to be associated with these other warmongers.
Well, look at that stupid baby Bush. He said once, "I'm a war president and mission accomplished," and so forth. Right.
Yeah, if his mission was to win wars, he did not do that. If his mission was to destroy civil liberties and tear the country apart and cause chaos around the world, then I guess he wins.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Well, who's going to be next? Who knows? Even can't trust anybody that gets into politics. It's just the wrong kind of person gets into politics, period.
100%. Okay, next question. It says, the state came close to creating vaccine mandates. Should they try this in the future? Is there a valid legal approach to fight them off?
My mind is not wired to think in terms of legalities because these laws, they're all fictions created by politicians in back rooms. And now, answer to the question is, I don't know. But I would say this, it's that if they mandate vaccines, do your best not to take it.
Yeah, I think we've learned, if people have learned anything in the last few years, it should have been that, at least, you'd hope. And I think the thing is that it's always a choice. It seems like these things are all like, even though it was a mandate for certain jobs, it was a mandate to stay in the military, but like you could, at least, so it hasn't come down to pure force and it's come down to coercion, where they try and say, we'll take away some of your treats if you don't do it. And we'll get you a free, Happy Meal if you do it. It's like that kind of like carrot and stick. But, I imagine it'd be like that again, rather than pure force, where they actually go door to door and try and inject you. I mean, I just can't imagine. That's just it'd be too expensive, because if they force people door to door, there would be loss of life for those people trying to do it.
Yeah, and maybe too risky, as unstable as the country is in many ways. But what shocks me is that people accept the concept of a government mandate. I mean, some people, I like this mandate, but not that mandate. I don't like any mandates. The idea of a mandate is essentially criminal. Who are these people that they can mandate that you do this?
Exactly.
The concept should be thrown out.
Yeah, the legitimacy of the state needs to be considered rather than the specific issues.
Yeah, it's more than considered. A question. In fact, I'll go further. More than question.
Denounced. Yes.
Right.
Okay. What does Doug think of the Freemasons, and have you ever interacted with them?
No, I have an old friend that I rode the rails with once who, uh, at the time he was a young guy, haven't been in touch with him for years, who wanted to join the Freemasons because he knew that these guys had a lot of money and they were all old, and he was a young guy, and he said, "Yeah, this might be a good arrow to have in my quiver." Uh, I'll have to ask him what he's found out in the subsequent years. Don't
Hmm.
know anything about him really, other than rumors that we've all heard.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of rumors about it, and you don't know. But I was just looking, I was reading something the other day that talked about, and I didn't know this, that in the early 19th century, there was an anti-Freemason political party, which was like one of the first third parties, I guess, that actually was all based around, because apparently it was some Freemason that came out and was in New York who was revealing the secrets of it, and then he disappeared, and it was presumed that he was murdered for it. And so they started this anti-Freemason party that got some traction for a while.
Yeah, I remember that. And of course, the Freemasons are supposed to have a secret handshake. And if you visit Washington, D.C., and you go to Alexandria, Virginia, they have a very strange looking large temple that they built there too. So they exist, I guess, but who knows? I mean, I suspect they're a little bit like the Catholic Church, which used to be really powerful and rich, but really isn't so powerful anymore, whether it's rich or not. I think the Freemasons have kind of gone downhill in the same way.
Mm. Certainly don't hear anything about it publicly anymore in the same way.
No, no, you don't. Even though all the founding fathers, or most of them were, I guess they say Freemasons.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the next one, he says, basically shared this video of Charlie Kirk talking to it was this Republican young activist guy talking to some young ladies about what it means to be a woman or a man. And they say, and one of the young ladies says that anyone who says they are or feels like they are is whatever they think. And anyway, his questions were, is there perhaps a hidden hand that's been guiding and cultivating some of this learned stupidity? That is to say, that we are looking at the result of a deliberate act to confuse or misguide and disorient a target demographic population of young people with a dark ulterior motive, confusing them into not even knowing what a man or a woman is.
Yeah. Well, in 1984, which is becoming Orwell's famous book, which was written in 1948, and is becoming more relevant and more prescient every day. One theme that he harps on over and over again is how the state will gaslight, is the current term, I guess. Everything. Don't believe your own eyes. Believe what I tell you. What are you going to believe? Your own eyes or what I tell you? And that seems to be happening, where people don't think for themselves. They believe what they're told by an authority figure, maybe an authority figure that mandates that you believe them. Yeah, so there's a trend in the world. It's always been there.
Yeah, there's just that,
But
I guess
but
go ahead.
don't you think the rise of the state has been behind this? Or the rise of the ultra powerful state. I mean the Nazis and the communists and the Maoists and all of these states require you to believe anything you're told to believe.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, my mother-in-law, grew up during the Cultural Revolution in China, and she talks about the fact that what they did to the language, they made it so they limited the words that you could use to describe things, and words that you would use in common discussion could also mean something that's subversive. So people could say that you said something subversive when you were not, when you in fact were saying that, but the meaning of it was clearly something that was normal. That like just to make everyone suspect. So the attack on the language, the attack on people's thinking seems to be a part of it, a key part of it.
Yeah, and this has always happened in religion as well. When you have a national religion that's taken really seriously, uh, you don't want to say anything or think anything that's heretical.
Mm.
Uh, this has happened a number of times through history, although religion is not what it used to be. Although Marxism, for instance, is just a secular religion. It's a religion that doesn't revolve around a God, per se.
And wokeism is the modern version of that.
It is. It is. So it all adds up. I guess part of it, I don't know if this was in the question that we just had, or whether maybe it's just implicit in the question, is that is there any warm body or group of warm bodies that are in back of this, causing it to happen? Uh, I I mean, I don't know. I mean, do you have an opinion as to who the warm bodies, if any, are?
Well, I mean, I don't know who it could be, but when you look at Yuri Bezmenov's way of overturning a state, with the demoralization and disintegration or whatever they were, that implied that implied a organizing body, an organizing force pushing it forward, didn't it?
Yeah, it does kind of imply it, yes.
So it does seem to me that there's something there, either that or there's something deeply toxic in humanity itself that makes you want to destroy things. It's either this is the evolution of a civilization where it destroys itself through these things, or there's a hidden hand behind it. And I think I have more faith in humanity, I think, than that, to think that it's just the natural way that people do things.
Yeah, I'd like to find out. This is a subject for to explore in fiction, actually. Don't know.
No. Maybe the Freemasons. Maybe they're behind it.
But like I said, if this is a prison planet and we're being punished for crimes we committed elsewhere in the universe, maybe we're just getting what we deserve. I don't know. Or, once again, it's all figments of your imagination and fiction when you get right down to it. Who knows?
Who knows? So it seems obvious that that CBDCs are going to be introduced. Seems very clear that we're moving in that direction. Do you have any thoughts on what that transition might be from what we have today to CBDCs?
Well, they are moving in that direction, certainly. And everybody has a smartphone, really. I guess you can get them a cheap smartphone of some type for $50. So that's not an excuse anymore. And it certainly works to the interests of the state and the central bankers. So it's going to be pushed. And just like we don't have coins really anymore. I mean, coins hardly even exist. And the coins that did exist for the last 50 years had no value. They were just slugs, in effect, tokens. So coins are gone, and paper currency will be gone. Maybe they'll leave us with, fives and tens just for, tipping car hops.
Or maybe they leave us with hundreds, but they're the equivalent of only fives and tens.
Yeah, exactly. But they won't be useful for anything else. And how can we stop this trend? Because it's definitely a trend from the powers that be. I don't know how you stop it, because history has a life of its own, actually.
Do you imagine how do you imagine they get us into it? Does it require bank failures or financial crisis again as the catalyst to justify it? Or is it, or is it like when they tried in what was it, Nigeria recently, where they just switched things over and you were supposed to, start using that instead of the physical currency, which failed, right?
Yeah,
Where they
and I
just
don't know
introduce it.
what's happened. I don't know what's happened since then in Nigeria, whether they've come out with a new and better paper currency that people are using today.
I don't know either. I think they just rolled back their efforts for CBDCs was last I heard, and implemented the old status quo, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, for what it's worth, a couple of shows ago, I think I demonstrated what was happening with the Argentine currency before Malay started changing things. I had a stack of 100 peso bills like this thick, roughly. And Malay has just issued a new 10,000, it is a 10,000 peso bill, just because it was too damned inconvenient to carry around all this clunky, heavy paper. Who knows what these people are going to do? I'm just flummoxed when I think about the state of the world. It's unpredictable. Well, it's a chaotic situation. It's becoming a chaotic situation. And the nature, or actually the definition of chaos is it's innately unpredictable. But all these psychological aberrations that people have, number one, like not knowing if a man is a man or a woman's a woman, things like that. And the basic tenets of economics, Keynesianism, Marxist economics, which are all wrong. Put those two things together in an unstable environment, and anything could happen. So I'm just really pleased that in the US, where I'm going next week, I'll be flying on this day next week, actually. I'm just glad that we don't have riots in the street yet. So I'm thankful for small things these days while they exist.
Right. The power is still on for the most part, I mean, you
Yeah,
gotta be grateful for the little things.
yeah, precisely.
All right, just a couple more questions for you. Actually, it looks like just one more. So somebody just wants to know, a young person in Australia, curious about your thoughts about him pursuing a career path in chemical engineering. He says, I know it's related to the whole renewable narrative, but it seems like over in Australia, there's demand for storage and expansion of the electric grid. And, just wonders in the future where the AI is making future uncertain for jobs, is chemical engineering a path that you think has some merit for the future?
I'm all for it because you're dealing in physical reality. And the things that you learn about chemical engineering are useful. They're useful and they can be built upon and they're real. So excellent path to pursue relative to lots and lots of others I can think of, like gender study or taking English literature or taking history, both of which are fine to learn about. They really are. They're wonderful, important to learn about. But the way they'll be taught in college, they may have been altered and modified in such a way that they're unrecognizable. So take a hard science, and chemical engineering is certainly one of them.
Okay. All right, good. Well, I think we'll leave it there for today, Doug. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week with more. Hopefully, the power still stays on in the U.S. while you're on your way there, and there's no riots in the streets.
Well, and World War III doesn't start and blossom. That's the biggie.
That's the biggie. All right, great. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Matt.